everybody. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. I'm so excited to discuss this topic of how can we be a better leader. I mean, whether we are in a leadership role ourselves or we're working towards getting there, or we're just within the role within our company, trying to essentially be a better perform, be a better leader, how can we go about putting ourselves in the best position to thrive, to succeed, to ensure that not only we're being the best leader ourselves, but that we're bringing up incredible leaders around us too. We've got a great guest with us today for our Lunch and Learn. We've got Peter Economy. Peter is a best-selling author, ghostwriter, and publishing consultant with more than 85 books to his credit and more than 2 million copies sold. He writes columns on leadership for Inc. He goes by The Leadership Guy, and he also served as the associate editor for Leader to Leader magazine. His latest book is Wait, I'm the Boss, the essential guide for new managers to succeed from day one. Peter, thanks for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
So we're here to talk about how we can be a better leader ourselves, but also how can we bring up other leaders to be better leaders around us. I guess I would love to learn, just from your perspective, how has leadership evolved over time?
That's a great question, because in some ways it hasn't evolved. I mean, I think the basics of leadership are very much the way they have been for perhaps centuries. You know, I think some of the best leaders of all time are the most inspiring people of all time. You know, you think about great leaders and they're very inspiring people. But of course, things have changed too. And it's mostly that's in the way that we lead. That's the way that we've moved from a top-down hierarchical form of leadership. I mean, that's what companies were doing when we went into the Industrial Revolution to work in factories and so forth. People realized that to keep people working at maximum efficiency, you wanted to have a hierarchy, a really strict hierarchy, and measure performance very strictly and metrics and so forth. But now we're going to more of a less hierarchical system where, you know, people are given more responsibility, more authority, lower down in the ranks. So it's not so strictly, I'm the boss, you know. It's not the boss does everything, the boss knows everything, the boss is the boss. People are being given that authority and responsibility themselves now. It's changed. It has changed in that way.
Yeah, I guess what I'd be curious to know is, I think that's one that's fascinating. I think that there's different leadership styles for different times in our history. I guess what was advantageous about that very authoritarian leadership style back perhaps in the Industrial Revolution, so 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and how, I guess, why is that less effective today? Yeah,
I think it's interesting because if you really look at the history of it, you know, most people before the Industrial Revolution were farmers, they were craftsmen, craftswomen. They were people who were sort of their own boss. For the most part, people were their own boss. You know, sure, you had people who worked for companies, but they were usually small companies. There were no large companies back in the, you know, until the Industrial Revolution, where all of a sudden you have these big factories. And you had to have a way of making sure people did what they were supposed to do. It's almost like a military boot camp. You know, you see the films where someone goes to boot camp, they shave their hair off, they start yelling at them. I mean, that's sort of the same thing. You're trying to mold them into a different kind of person than they are. You're trying to kind of beat the, I don't know, the initiative out of them in some way so that they start following the rules. You know, that all of a sudden the rules are different and you've got to change the way you act. And it's very much the same, I think, back in the Industrial Revolution. All these people who were their own bosses, they were farmers, they were craftspeople, they were whatever they used to do. All of a sudden they had to work for a boss. And the only way that the boss could keep control over an organization, especially a really large organization, was through this hierarchy. I'm the boss, you do what I say or you're out of here. You know, it's really simple.
That is really fascinating. It's well, it almost begs the thought. The question was, perhaps this authoritarian style of leadership, perhaps that wasn't a good style of leadership to begin with. I love what you kind of discussed and kind of led down the rabbit hole of, we were trying to change people from being more creative, where they were their own boss, let's say as farmers or craftspeople, to now working for a boss. But perhaps in that day and age, maybe in the, you know, just immediately after the Industrial Revolution, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, there wasn't as much widely circulated media that anybody could input information into. So perhaps this leadership style wasn't that effective back then, but because of the conditioning that we had provided, the people that were given the voice, that being the people that were higher up on this hierarchy, they were telling others, this is how you follow the rules, this is how you stay in line, and we were almost conditioning ourselves to believe, okay, well then this is how I have a successful career. We just work for the same company for the rest of our lives. We are okay with having this boss. We're okay with kind of letting the decisions be made by people other than ourselves and just kind of following the rules of being okay with our paycheck. Is that kind of where you're kind of going with this, Peter?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that, that kind of road we're going down here, because yeah, we were all conditioned, and this basically held sway for 150 years. I mean, since the mid 1800s, maybe 1850, 1860ish, when these factories started coming around, the advent of steam engines and all this kind of stuff, basically held sway until the last couple of decades. I mean, most companies were very hierarchical, and even today, I mean, there's companies that are still hierarchical. There are people who are the boss. I'm the boss, and what I say goes. I don't care what you think. If you got some, if you think you know the answer, then you're in the wrong place. Get out of here, because I'm the boss. I know. I mean, that's still out there. But I think overall, yeah, it's interesting. If you overlaid today's philosophy, of leadership, of giving people more, allowing them to be creative, allowing them to use their own brains, if you overlaid that back 150 years ago, it might have actually worked better. Who knows? Obviously, we can't go back there, but it certainly works better today. People do not want to be bossed around. People do not want to be ignored. People want to feel like they're part of an organization that's doing something. They want to change the world. Everybody wants to have a job that has an impact on people, a positive impact on people. And smart bosses, smart managers, smart leaders know that, and they let people go. They let people do and be creative and give the best of themselves.
That's really fascinating. That's a really interesting thought. I'm thinking about right now what you're saying. It almost is like what you're saying is that it's our own human nature to be entrepreneurial, to drive our own creative process. And it's fascinating because I've heard other people say things to me like, well, Garrett, not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur, but perhaps what you're saying is that in our own human nature of, historically what our lineage has done, it has been in part entrepreneurial. And maybe it wasn't necessarily I own my own business, but maybe I own my own farm, or I make my own crafts, or I do this part. And so as leaders, if we can empower our people to be entrepreneurial, or intrapreneurial sometimes is what it's called, so then they can go out and do their own projects, feel like they've got autonomy over how they do it, when they get it done, and what the outcome is, that can empower them to really feel like they've accomplished something and did it on their own without necessarily feeling like they're following the rules of somebody else.
Right, and I think the key word that you said there was entrepreneurial, because I don't know how many times I've talked to managers who will say, I just don't understand why my employees don't treat the business the way I do. These are people who company owners or managers or executives. I don't understand why they don't, treat it the same way I do. They don't look at this business the same way I do. Well, the reason is because chances are you haven't given them ownership. I mean, that's the other key word that is in there is a sense of ownership, or a physical, true ownership, where they get stock, they get, stock options. But even if they don't get a true, equity ownership, at least they need to feel like they have ownership over the work they do. And that's exactly what you were saying, is that you give them autonomy, you give them authority, you give them their projects, you let them run with them. And you don't tell them how to get somewhere. You tell them where you want to go. You tell your people, I want you to get to this goal. Here's the goals we're setting. Let's achieve these goals. But I'm not going to tell you how to get there. That's up to you. And that's the way that people do unleash the creativity within them, and the way that they feel ownership over the work they do, whether or not they have equity. They'll still feel ownership.
So I have a question.
Sure.
If we look at this, when did it shift from being very linear, traditional, to swinging back to entrepreneurial and autonomy within an organization, and why did that happen?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it sort of came out of the 60s. This whole peace, love, and understanding. Whatever the 60s generation. You know, I'm a baby boomer. I'm in my early 60s, and I went through the tail end of the 60s. You know, when I was a teenager, and we expected more. I think we decided that there was more to this world. There was more to our lives than just being bossed around, just being a cog in the machine. So I think up through the 60s was when everyone accepted that, you know, you worked for a company, you got a job, you worked there for your entire life, you gave everything you had to your company, the company gave everything to you, probably a pension. You get a retirement pension after serving 30 years with this company. And I think that after the 60s, so probably in the 70s, 80s, the people like me who started getting in positions of responsibility, who became managers, were saying, this isn't, the old way isn't working. The old hierarchical top-down model doesn't work for us. You know, we want to do more. We want to be more. We want to impact the world in a bigger and better way. So I think that change pretty much happened probably starting in the 70s and then through the 80s, where the whole model of leadership and management just changed.
Interesting.
So Peter, what I'd be curious to know is, what are common mistakes a lot of current leaders make right now? What are a lot of mistakes that you see a lot of leaders making as they lead their teams or as they grow within their organizations today?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that leaders continue to make is they don't spend enough time developing their people. So, you know, I know people who make a living off of being trainers and speakers, you know, motivational speakers, inspiring people. And the first thing that seems to get cut whenever there's any kind of economic downturn like what we've been through this year is training and is speaking. You know, these speakers that come in or consultants, or that all gets cut. And probably for good reason, because, I mean, that's sort of expendable. But it really isn't expendable. You need to train your people. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make time and time again is they don't put enough effort into developing their people. And that includes developing new leaders. You know, you mentioned I have this book, Wait, I'm the Boss, and it's all about new leaders. You know, there's all kinds of statistics out there that, you know, I think companies with less than 100 employees, they only get about 24 minutes of management training a year. And for companies that are over 100 employees, they get less than 12 minutes of training. This is for an entire year. Companies just aren't training their leaders. And then they expect their leaders to do great things, but they aren't training them. I know when I became a manager myself, the very first time I became a manager, I was here in San Diego. I was working for a software development company. And one day my boss said, oh, I'm going to put you in charge of this group of people. These are other administrative people. I was a contract negotiator at the time. So I would be in charge of a small group of admin people doing like HR type functions and accounting and stuff. And I said, okay, great. So the next day I walked in and it was just the same as the day before. I wasn't any different. I hadn't been trained. The only training I had to be a manager, and that was true from that day forward, was the management I had seen my bosses give, or other bosses in the organization, another organization I'd worked for. It was just seeing what other people had done, and maybe some of the bosses were good, and maybe some of them weren't good, but that's all I had to go on. So again, not developing employees, not in developing the new leaders that you have is a big mistake, big problem.
That's really fascinating. I think those statistics about how much management training a typical leader will get, or a typical person will get in a year for a less than 100 company or more than 100 person company, that is shocking to me, and it's fascinating. I'd be curious, why do you think that is? I mean, my initial assumptions are that perhaps it's because it's less, what we're measuring in terms of outcomes becomes very abundantly clear on a macro level of if we've done a good enough job developing our people. My assumption is that perhaps maybe because there's not enough micro checkpoints to kind of see, like, is this person on track? Kind of like sales, like if you made a sale, you know you got a sale. So if you're on track to hit your sales quota for the quarter or for the year, you'll know it. You can easily measure that. But I would imagine for leadership, there aren't as many clear, maybe micro steps towards assessing, like, hey, is this person on track to getting to where they want to be? I don't know. What are your thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, well, clearly, there's many things that leaders do that is quantifiable. You give your leaders more responsibility, more authority. It might be over budget, might be over managing people, might be over managing projects. So you can certainly quantify those things. But I think the biggest problem is that it just sort of sits on the back burner. It's something that most managers, most executives know that they should be doing. Company owners know they should do, but they just never quite get around to it. There's so many more pressing things. I mean, you're fighting fires all day long. When you're a company owner, an entrepreneur, a manager, an executive, you're always fighting fires. So you're always having to deal with those most important things that are on your plate. Usually those are customer related, they're budget related, finance related. They're not personnel related unless your people are just on strike or something. And all of a sudden it gets to the front burner. But those things, people development tends to sit on the back burner for many companies, I believe, because it's just not crisis. It's not a crisis.
So how do we bring it from the back to the forefront to leaders? And what are the key phrases or wording that we should use or could use to have leaders realize how important this is?
Yeah. Well, I think you get what you reward. There's an old saying, a friend of mine, Bob Nelson, Dr. Bob, he says you get what you reward. And that's true. So I think as a company owner, executive, someone at the top of the organization, they have to make it a part of the evaluation of the managers, of the people who you're expecting to do these things. It has to be a part of their evaluation. So make that a part of your performance appraisal. Make that a part of your one-on-one meetings, your weekly staff meetings, whatever you do. Make that a part of the things you measure, and make sure that you do measure it, and then make sure that you provide feedback to your people. Make sure that they're actually doing it. And if they're not doing it, then feed that back to them. Tell them this is something you need to do. And what are you going to do this next week to do that? I want you to tell me right now, what are you going to do to make this happen? And it's not your job as the executive, as the owner, to do it for them. You don't want to take that monkey on your back. It's really their job. What are you going to do? And then if they, in the next one-on-one, the next week, they haven't done it, you can only go so long without doing it before there's some sort of consequences. So you get what you reward. If you reward that kind of thing, you'll get that kind of thing.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really fascinating. It sounds almost like, I'm a big believer in atomic habits and just the power of intentionality and taking small steps on a regular basis to actually achieve a massive outcome. As a leader, what we can do is take time, whether that be every day or every week, to intentionally carve out some time for just leadership. And if it's every day, maybe it's 15 minutes just of intentional focused thought on how you can develop somebody on your team or a group of people that report to you or that you work with. And even if it doesn't necessarily lead to a direct, tangible outcome in that moment, if we're saying, hey, I'm spending these 15 minutes thinking about my people and this is what I'm going to do, or this is how I'm going to go about building something, it grows and it builds over time, as opposed to one big hurrah of 2 hours, deep focused, intentional energy on trying to do something and maybe doing that once a year randomly in happenstance.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to do this, besides sending somebody off to a course. I think the natural reaction for a lot of leaders is to just, where's a course I can send this person to? I mean, it's easy. I could just spend a little bit of money and I don't have to think about it. They'll take this course, this training company will take care of it for me. That's not really the right approach, I don't think. There's all kinds of things you can do. You can actually do like a book club. There's always new management books out. Every week there's a new management book. So pick one of those books like Atomic Habits. Say, let's do a little book club. Let's do our own little management book club. And let's read a chapter. Every week we'll read a chapter. And let's talk about it for half an hour, 15 minutes. Let's just talk about it. Someone give a presentation on that chapter. And rotate through your group of managers. Each week, someone else give a different, chapter presentation, and talk about it. It doesn't have to be some kind of, humongous system that you've got in place. It could be something really simple like that.
That's awesome. how can we catch ourselves when we're in bad habits? Like if I start to potentially go down a negative habit as a leader, how can I catch myself? I think as leaders, we all intentionally want to be the best leaders we possibly can, but then something slips by the wayside or something happens, and then that leads into potentially some bad habits, and we know we shouldn't do it, but we justify why we do it anyways because of this or that reason, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then all of a sudden it comes to the forefront and we think to ourselves, oh crud, what is going on? Why did this happen? How can we catch ourselves before we get to that moment? How can we catch ourselves in bad habits and course correct?
Yeah, I think there's a problem that we all have. A lot of us are blind to our bad habits. We're myopic. We can't really see them well. They're fuzzy, and we may not realize we have bad habits. And we'll be, again, we're busy fighting fires. We're busy taking care of this. We've got kids screaming in the background. My dog is jumping on me. All kinds of things are going on. So, we tend to lose that focus on that. And I think the important thing to get is someone that you trust, someone you know, who will point that out. So you need feedback. You need other people who kind of watch your back for you, whether it's your boss. I mean, ideally it's your boss who's giving you that feedback in performance, and not just every, once a year. It should be happening all the time. If you're in a meeting and you make a bad presentation because of some bad habit, you're doing something that gets people distracted, some nervous habit. You'd like someone to point that out, and maybe your boss will. Have someone trusted. Ask somebody to let you know when you're going down the wrong road. You need trusted people who will be, have candor, will be honest with you, won't pull any punches, who aren't the yes men and women who just say everything you do is great, I love you, you're wonderful, you never do anything wrong. You need someone to give you that feedback, and because we may not see it ourselves, we may never see it ourselves. You can't expect to see it yourself. So I think find somebody.
That's so true. It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, we choose actions because we think they're the best action in that given moment. We justify it in our minds for why we choose to act in that way because it is consistent with how we've decided to act. It's part of our identity. But that opens up a whole can of worms because it makes you think to yourself, well, there's a few different things. One, how can I foster a culture that is open to them giving me feedback? Two, how can I ensure that I am not defensive when I do get this feedback if I've acted incorrectly, because that's not easy. And three, how can I ensure that they feel comfortable being objective with me and just giving that objectivity to me, being candid with me and just saying, hey, here's where I don't know if you really hit the ball. How can they give it to me in a way that's gentle enough that it's like I can eat it and consume it versus me reacting defensively?
Yeah. It's just something you got to get over. I mean, that's, there's a book, and I've never read it, Radical Candor by Kim Scott, I think it is. And I'm working on a book project. I write books. I do a lot of ghostwriting for people. And one of the books that we talk a lot about in her book, the person I'm ghostwriting this book for, is Radical Candor. And it's all about that. It's all about just tell me the way it is, like it is. You don't have to be nice. You don't have to pull punches. You don't have to try to sugarcoat it, beat around the bush. Just tell me the way it is. But you're right. The flip side is you've got to be ready to accept that. You've got to be ready to accept that feedback without defensiveness, without getting your feelings hurt. This is good. I mean, feedback is the breakfast of champions. This is something that's a good thing to get. It's something you should want to get. And yeah, it might hurt. Oh, it hurts, and it stings, and the words, are powerful. But boy, it's for your benefit, and it's for the benefit of your organization and for your customers and the community in which you work.
Yeah, I think sometimes as professionals and as people, we have to get out of our own head. Like, people aren't wasting their breath on us. They wouldn't give us this feedback unless they actually wanted to succeed. If they didn't care, they'd be yes people. They'd say, yeah, sure, it was awesome, amazing. If they actually care, they're going to give you the feedback even if it hurts. Now, that also means on our side, we need to be open to that feedback, and that it might not necessarily be what we want to hear. It might not necessarily be how we want to hear it. I'm a big fan that you brought up Kim Scott, huge fan of Kim Scott. She talks about this thing called ruinous empathy. And then on the flip side, being overly harsh on your people just for the sake of hitting numbers. And so to kind of convey that ruinous empathy is this idea that we became a manager because we were a great individual performer. And so when we become a manager, we think to ourselves, oh, shoot, I want to be the most nice and empathetic leader I possibly can be, and be okay with us not hitting actual numbers or goals or quotas that we're trying to hit, because I want to be someone that's well liked. And that ultimately doesn't necessarily lead to great outcomes, because we're stressed out, because we're not now trying to pick up the slack for everybody else, because we care about our performance. On the other side, you've got, the person who got in the role for the same exact reasons, but they run their team like a drill sergeant, and they said, you must hit these numbers or else you're fired. And so everybody's sure getting their numbers in, but they hate their jobs and they hate their manager. And so having that fine balance between the two is so critical. But I think that absolutely plays into how we receive feedback, because we need to know, are we being too nice? Are we being too hard? Are we hearing our people, and are we giving them the opportunity to thrive? Are we saying words that are conducive to what they want to hear, or are we potentially bringing them down?
Right. Yeah, totally. I think that when I was a manager back in the old days, this is more than 20 years ago, when I was a manager, I definitely erred on the side of wanting people to like me. It was like, I want my people to like me. I want them to, think I'm a good guy. More so than erring on the side of being direct, highly directive. I should have been somewhere in between. I was more on the side of, I just want them to like me. So I'm not a manager anymore.
And that has its downfalls, because if you're so focused on being liked by other people, you may not necessarily get the results you're trying to accomplish with your team. Whereas if you're so focused on the results and not on the people, you're going to potentially have a lot of turnover on your team and having to rehire, retrain, and rebuild more people back up.
Yeah, and again, the key phrase there is you get what you reward. If you're rewarding people for, saying nice things to you, then you're going to get lots of that. If you're rewarding people, by beating them up because they don't make the numbers, well, guess what? They're going to leave. they're going to find a place where they don't get beat up all the time for things like that. Sure, they've got to perform, but you don't need to get beat up all the time over.
Peter, what are your thoughts on the way you manage is also the way you are in your personal relationships? So if you can change the way you are in your management style by having vulnerability, trust, and communication, that would probably affect or change the way you relate to your personal relationships.
Yeah, I think when you go that direction from your work relationships to your personal relationships, that could very well be the case. Obviously Brene Brown is out there with vulnerability and courage. Those are her big things. And I know that people who are inspired by that, by being more courageous, being more vulnerable, that's got to carry over into your personal life. That's got to be something that you just carry throughout your life. I mean, I know personally, there's things that I do. I don't worry about what people think about me. I don't really care. But I used to worry about it. And I think that I realize in my work that I'm really good at what I do. So I'm carrying that with me throughout my life. That carries over into my personal life too. I don't really worry about what people think about me in my personal life anymore, although I used to. And I think that came out of my work life originally, because I felt really accomplished in what I do. And I just had that self-confidence and self-esteem, that strong sense of that I then carried into the rest of my life.
That's great.
Peter, I'd be curious, just on that same note, where do you see the future of leadership going?
I think the future of leadership is definitely headed toward a direction where people are more independent. So people become leaders themselves. So I worked on a book a long time ago. It was called The Leadership Ensemble. It was about an orchestra. It's an orchestra in New York City that doesn't have a conductor. I mean, most orchestras have conductors. I mean, that's, there's someone up there at the front that leads the orchestra. That's the leader of the orchestra. This orchestra doesn't have a conductor. So what they do is they have this model of shared leadership where it rotates throughout the organization. So people rise when leaders are needed. Someone rises to take that leadership role. It could be anybody. There's this organization had, say, 40 people, 45 people in the orchestra. Any one of those 45 people could be a leader at any time, depending on what piece of music they were working on. Someone was an expert on that one piece of music that they wanted to play. They would rise up and take leadership roles. I think that's what Gore, so the Gore company that makes Gore-Tex, they've been very famous for their leadership model for quite some time. And that's what they do. When someone becomes a manager there, they just draw from the employees, and someone steps up into a management role. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that in organizations where leadership isn't so much a fixed position. You know, we don't just name you the manager you're the leader. I think you're going to have leaders throughout the organization more so. And now that people are working more so away from the office, we'll see what happens after this year if people remain working at home for the most part, or if they end up back in their offices. I know that REI, the big outdoor equipment company, retailer, they built this humongous multi-million-dollar headquarters building, I think in Tacoma, Washington or something. Beautiful. They spent years and millions of dollars building this building. Then COVID hit. All of a sudden they sent all their employees home. They said, actually, this is better. This is better for us. It costs us less money. The people are doing exactly what they need to do. And now their brand spanking new headquarters is for sale. You can go and buy it because they don't want it anymore. So I think a lot of companies are going to be looking at that. So if people aren't in the office all the time, they're going to need more leaders out in the field. You know, people in their homes being leaders or in teams being leaders.
I just had a comment on that. You said that and it sparked with me. I have 3 people that have started jobs recently, and I was asking them about, oh, tell me about it. And they're like, well, we're creating it as I go. I'm working with the founder, and I don't really have a title, but it's playing to my strengths. So it's actually having someone come in and you're molding them on their strengths, not the other way around, trying to have them jam them into a space that they don't fit. That's really interesting because I think it is what you just hit on. And I love the orchestra analogy because it resonates. I understand that.
Yeah. And we're in a time right now where everything is in flux. I mean, everything can be changed. So it's a really interesting time in business today, and people are changing. New models are being tried. Like you said, people are finding new roles, and instead of trying to patch up their weaknesses, let's play to your strengths. Why not?
Love that. Peter, this has been awesome. This has been a great lunch and learn. I really am grateful that you're here and sharing your insight and wisdom with us and our audience. Last question, how can our audience learn more about you and your work?
My website, petereconomy.com.
Perfect. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being here. This was great. I really enjoyed it. Everybody in the audience, thank you all for being here. I look forward to seeing you at our next lunch and learn. Have a wonderful rest of your day. See you, everybody.